It's difficult to disagree with your premise because very often when crime statistics go up, people say that it's because they're being reported more. So it's inevitable that someone has a right to point to statistics that say they're going down and say, isn't that because people are reporting them less, because they don't trust or believe in the system to solve the crime in which they've been involved or in which they are a victim. I know you're making a point about crime generally, but I find it impossible to move on from the case of that little girl shot in her own home without talking about that a little bit. And first of all, it's the most appalling thing you can imagine, isn't it? You know, mother and daughter thinking they are safely in their own home, and what seems from a preliminary read to be gang-on-gang violence comes crashing into their home with fatal results for them. Now, it seems to me, and it's been a number of years since I've practiced at the bar, but I certainly prosecuted and defended people involved in serious matters. There is very little you can say on behalf of somebody who's shot and killed a little girl, and this guy has got to realise he's going to get caught. Right? There is an omerta. There's a rule of silence very often or for people involved in gang activity. It will not apply here. He should realise that someone knows who he is and he's going to get his collar felt very quickly. And the only thing he can do to help himself, having been so incredibly stupid, the only clever thing he can do is to give himself up and plead guilty. Because those are the only things that are going to be available for him in mitigation, short of some profound mental health issues and so forth, which may come out later, short of believing himself to have been in danger from the man he shot. By the way, I note that the victim that he shot, friends went into the home, picked him up and took him out. Going past an injured woman and a dead child, but they had no right to know she was dead at the time, who could have well have done with their help, right, brushed past the two of them to take him out. Right? So this is the worst kind of gang-on-gang violence, and the only thing that he can do to have any kind of mitigation in our court system is to give himself up and plead guilty at the earliest opportunity. He's not going to do that. I mean, he may do.
The headline, the Liverpool Echo, the local newspaper, it says, solidarity is Liverpool's strength. Today, it must mean helping to catch Olivia's killer. Olivia's the girl, obviously, that we're just talking about. And the local paper is saying, you know, somebody must know who this person is. Damn right someone will know who this person is, Joe, and those people will do everything in their power to defend this little squirrel and not get him turned into the police.
I don't know. I think, as Alex said, this is such an appalling crime. You know, there is nothing that would mitigate the death of an innocent child, but in her own home with her mum, it's not even as though it was on the street, you know, it was an accident. I think there might be people out there who actually think this is gone too far. There will be somebody who is giving him shelter and sanctuary at the moment, but I think anyone who has got any heart and any shred of decency, and, as Alex says, any sense about making what is so dreadful less dreadful might actually react.
Two more words on that. For all we know, that person is watching this show tonight, that person that knows something, and they should think about the fact that actively assisting this person now will mean a significant amount of trouble and blame for them, unless they come forward and help in that person identifying himself. So that's why that's the other reason he ought to come forward himself, because soon enough someone's going to shop him. Right.
I mean, I hope that you're right. Maybe I just am losing faith in humanity, because I think that these people would do everything possible to cover up for themselves, get themselves off the hook, rather than looking in the mirror and going, do you know what, I need to listen to the things like you're saying, be a good, decent person. You're not a good, decent person.
There'll be somebody. There will be, you know, this chap's mother or sister or wife or child or somebody who will actually, you know, not everybody is bad, and not everybody who is, for whatever reason, involved in this sort of criminal underworld is as bad as this.
Yeah, and I imagine the guy he shot knows who he is.
Yes,
I imagine his friends know who he is, so that's a start. But the other thing to bear in mind, Michelle, is that people watching this, people thinking about this story, many of them will be outraged, and from time to time a wealthy person comes forward and says, I will assist this process by offering a reward for this person's capture. I imagine that's going to be forthcoming soon too as well. And this is there's the pressing reasons for this idiot to come forward, idiot's too mild a term, but this person to come forward and hand himself in will just get more and more strong.
Yeah, and I tell you, I was just looking into Merseyside generally. More than 30 incidents involving weapons have been reported by police in June, July and August. And I've got a printout of all of them. And when you go through them, I was trying to look at, who are these kind of people? And one of the things that shocked me was the ages involved in some of these incidents. So 17th of June, 2 men are stabbed. An 18-year-old was arrested. The 18th of June, a 16-year-old was arrested. The 5th of July, a 50-year-old was stabbed. 53-year-old was arrested. It seems to span all different... Here in July, a 23-year-old. I mean, it spans everyone. It's not just stupid kids. It's men in their 50s.
Yes, exactly. And I think, Merseyside has, like many big cities, has got a problem with gangs, the same as London, the same as Manchester, the same as Bristol and many of our major cities. I think, you were talking about lawless Britain, and every now and again you will get a story or a spate of stories which send fear and chills through people. And I think it's quite important to separate the difference between the fear of crime and actual crime. And I think, most of us go about our lives relatively safely. People shouldn't be in a position where they feel frightened to go out. This is obviously a million times worse because it happened to somebody in their home where they should be safe. But I think, as Alex was saying, there are issues about reporting crime. There are issues about whether the police investigate crime. And I know, from talking to police officers, that many, many times they won't even bother to investigate something like a shoplifting unless it's over a certain level. And
that's the problem, right? So the punishments, because one of your viewers was saying that they think the thing is we don't have harsh enough punishments. But the thing is, if you don't think for a moment you're going to get caught, it doesn't matter what the punishment is.
Right, which leads me nicely, ladies and gentlemen. If you don't think that you are going to get caught, you might find yourself doing things like this. Look at this footage. Of course, this was streamed on one of the social media sites, I think it was, TikTok. So this is a McDonald's. If you're watching, not listening, this is a gang of kids, say teenage kids, and they've gone into a McDonald's in Nottingham, and they seem to think that they can just jump the counter, grabbing whatever they can get their grubby little mitts on, quite frankly, fries, burgers, whatever it is. They could not care less. Most of them have not covered their face. Yeah. Most of them think they're absolute little big men. And it sickens me because I look at this and no, I can't compare this to what's just gone on in terms of the killing of a child, and nor would I intend to correlate the two. But to me, there is this complete lack of consideration. I can just do what I want.
Because you know that the chances are that nobody's going to come and deal with it. The local shop round the corner from me, which is a small supermarket, people walk in there and brazenly steal stuff and walk out again. And the staff behind the counter can't get to them. They can see them on CCTV, but because it's only, a few bottles of booze or whatever, it's not, the police won't bother to investigate. So people know that. And this is the problem. We want the police to investigate every single crime. They can't. They haven't got the resources. But there isn't anything being sort of sent out as a message to people that actually it's not always about criminality. Yes. If your face is on
confidence in law.
You actually should not be able to get a job interview, let's say,
Yeah, don't make me laugh. No. Those people in there nicking those burgers, they don't want a job. They couldn't care less if they've got a job interview.
Hang on a second.
Do you remember after the football when a crowd danced on the emergency vehicles that were parked up by London Bridge? And they did so brazenly. They didn't try to hide who they were. They thought that they were out there on top of the world. They didn't care. Months later, when they tearfully said sorry, were humiliated in the press and got and went through the courts rightly and were punished for it, it. They felt rather different. And I hope these people you've just shown, showing complete contempt. If you were a member of staff at that McDonald's, you'd have been terrified.
You would.
Right? It doesn't matter that they're just taking a burger or chips or whatever. You'd have been absolutely terrified by this incident. And these guys deserve to get caught. They deserve, if they are of that age, for their parents to be hauled in and to hear just what the rest of us think of this kind of behaviour. Look at the poor staff, cowering away from them there.
Absolutely dreadful.
Well, I would say someone. I would say I've got a lot of emails saying, Michelle, why aren't you pointing out to anyone that's listening or watching that the majority of those people that were just doing that were young black teenagers? And I do wonder if there's something in the kind of concept, a lot of the political movement about Black Lives Matter, there's a big tenet of that, which is, I can't swear, but it's F the police, if you know what I mean, at tea time. ACAB, which, if you know what that abbreviation means, it's not fit for tea time. And I do wonder, have we got this new generation of these kids that really do think F the police? I'm going to do things like that?
Well, but hating the police is a genuine equal opportunities pursuit. I promise you that there are gangs of kids in every culture that think that. Now, it is true that the gang we just saw were black teenagers. I can make lots of points about the fact that there's gangs in every culture. The thing I would resent is the inability to notice the obvious, that is a gang of black teenagers. That's true, and we can point that out. But there are gangs from every background.
And the incident that I've just been talking about, which is in a small town in Kent, they are gangs of white teenagers. I mean, they're not marauding in the same way. But, I mean, you can't just...
They're still making your shopkeeper's life a misery.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, there are small incidents that, having said that we should all be able to walk the streets safely and, we have to get it into perspective. Teenagers, young people, if you challenge them on something quite minor, like dropping litter, the abuse
the aggression you get back.
And I find what's really, really upsetting is that it's sexualised, aggressive abuse, to women of my age, which is completely unpalatable. And you sort of think, so when you come to me for a job or when I'm judging your next school debate, do you know, it's something about being able to, and what I think, I'm not articulating this very well, but they need to understand that they are in a community and that it will come back.
You were articulating that well, if I may say, and the people who did what we just watched on your monitors, Michelle, believe that they were doing what they were doing utterly without consequences. And that's why what Joe says has force to it, in my view.
Well, I love you, Joe, but I think you're just being too optimistic about some of these people, because you're saying, when they abuse me, they might not realise that they might have to come to me for a job interview. I don't think that these people want jobs. I think, and I blame social media for a lot of this, I think social media presents to these young kids this image of this instant gratification.
Oh, yes.
You can get whatever you want. Yeah. You don't need to go and graft. You don't need to get a minimum wage job. You don't need to work yourself up the ranks. You want one of those watches? No worries, my friend. You just walk up to that fella there, you just rip it off his arm. If he won't give you it, you just pull your knife out your pants and do him in. That's what I think social media is presenting to kids.
No, absolutely. And I think, we don't know whether, or maybe you do know, whether that was a TikTok challenge or something like that. But what they're forgetting is that is now on record.
Yeah.
So any future employer, and actually when you were talking about the football hooligans, there was also somebody who was an estate agent who lost his job for something. I can't remember what it was.
The same incident, I think.
But, abuse. There was the person who urinated on the memorial to the murdered policeman at Westminster. They do eventually get caught. And whilst they're showing these photographs of themselves, they're actually doing CCTV's job for them. The question is whether the police will investigate.
Do anything about it.
And whether the communities, the communities who are the leaders and mentors for those kids are going to say, what the hell?
But see, once upon a time, faced with something like that, the business would do something. And the restaurants, the shop, McDonald's would offer a reward for the prosecution of people who'd so abused their staff and so forth. Perhaps they'd be afraid of a backlash in the current environment. But that's the sort of thing I'd like to see happen here. Because those people can be identified from that footage, no doubt about it.
Well, actually, one of the McDonald's have banned unaccompanied under 18s after whatever time it is, I think it's 5 o'clock, whatever time it is, because their staff are getting abused. And maybe I'm just too harsh in my old age, but I'm just disgusted when I see that footage. I don't look at them and think, oh, they're ruining their job prospects. I just think you're absolute.
Well, they're not thinking that. But the reality is, you know, I mean, OK, you could, in an ideal world, you'd round them all up and fling them into prison. But the reality is that, as Alex said, it will come back to haunt them at some point.
Well, good.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree.
Martin says, Michelle, when I first started in the police in 1986, there was a culture of dealing hard with the criminals and doing everything possible to protect the general public. Then the general public became liberal and wanted the criminals' rights to be protected above the victim. Sentences and prisons do not serve the purpose they were created for. If the police are not allowed to use the necessary force and intimidation against the small number of individuals that blight our society, then the public gets the results of years of that liberal policy.
I think that's a rather vague and all-encompassing statement. I think we've seen terrible...
I thought it was quite sensible, Martin.
Well, I think we've seen terrible incidents of police brutality and appalling policing. And, you know, you only have to look at what is being investigated in the Met at the moment. You know,
yes, that's true.
There are good ones and there are bad ones. There are bent coppers, there are good coppers, just as there are criminals and, law-abiding people. I think the problem is that the more that people are perceived to get away with it, whether that's through criminality or through McDonald's banning them or whatever it is, the easier it becomes for law-abiding people to think, well, if they're not going to do anything about those kids stealing 5 bottles of vodka from the local store, then actually I won't bother to do this, or I'll take this.
It breaks down the social compact,
yeah, exactly.
doesn't it? But so I might not have used the words that Martin, your correspondent, used, but I accept that it was a bit vague, Jay. But on the other hand, it came from a background in policing, and I understand the point that Martin was making. I might think about it like this: that the police should be reassuring to the law-abiding and fearsome to the law-breaking. And if our police spend their time, and we've been getting along well hitherto, and I hate to break that mood, but if the police spend their time dancing around at festivals and doing TikToks and going and feeling people's collars for tweets they've sent because it's made somebody feel anxious, then it's neither reassuring to the law-abiding nor fearsome to the law-breaking. In fact, they're not really, I think, doing their jobs. And what's behind Martin's comment, and the reason I seek sort of to defend it, is that there's a lot of coppers who want to actually enforce the law, who actually do want to do the kinds of jobs that we want, who aren't afraid to go into that McDonald's and try and stop it happening. But their leadership is telling them you should be focusing instead on these non-crimes that, you know, because we can work out who that Twitter person is and so forth, so let's go and do that.
Yes, and I'll tell you what some people would say, because I covered the dancing Macarena moronic police yesterday, and people were getting in touch with me and saying, oh, Michelle, you don't know what you're talking about. These people were doing community outreach. They're trying to get in with the communities. My response to that is very simple. You're not supposed to be getting in with your communities. You're supposed to be policing the communities. There's supposed to be a difference between you and them. I can tell you right now, my inbox is on fire.